Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Now, are we on text number 6?
Yes, Prabhu. Text number 6.
Okay. That'll be page 262. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 29th day of August 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana-yoga. That's the yoga of meditation. And we're on text number 6 at the top of page 262. Bandhur Atmatmanas Tasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanas Tushatrutve Vartetatmaeva Shatruvat Bandhuratmatmanas Tasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat. You're up. Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat. Tyler, you want to try? Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Shatrutve Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat. Saul, you want to try? Okay. It's not, I don't want to insult you by not calling, I guess. Anyone on Zoom? No, he doesn't. Yeah, not this lifetime.
Bandhuratmatmanastasya
Bandhuratmatmanastasya
Yenatmaevatmana Jita
Yenatmaevatmana Jitaha
Anatmanastu Shatrutve
Anatmanastu Shatrutve
Vartetatmaeva Shatruvat.
Vartaitatmaeva Shatruvat. Okay. All right, let me read through the synonyms. Bandhu, friend, Atma, the mind, Atmana, of the living entity, Tasya, of him, Yena, by whom, Atma, the mind, Eva, certainly, Atmana, by the living entity, Jitaha, conquered, Anatmana, of one who has failed to conquer the mind, two, but Shatrutve, because of enmity, Varteta, remains Atma Eva, the very mind, Shatruvat, as an enemy. Translation. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain his greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. Avarice is greed. But But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictations of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Om jnana timarandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, Krishna is continuing to describe the mind. If you recall text 5, Udadet atmanatmanam, natmanam abhasadiyet, atmaivyatmano bandhur, atmaivyariparatmanaha. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind, and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So one thing that Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here at the very first sentence, the purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. So how many people really think, I mean not in this room, but how many people in general really think that human life has a mission, you know, other than surviving, trying to enjoy as far as you can till you leave the stage, and that's it? That's it. That's all there is. But the basic principle of the Vedic wisdom is that human life and life in general has a mission, but only in human life can we actually succeed in that mission. And what is that mission? Very important to understand. So the first question to ask is, who are we? A famous encounter took place between a great devotee named Sanatana Goswami and Lord Chaitanya, who's an incarnation of Krishna for this age. He's the one who started the chanting of Hare Krishna. It's the most prominent practice in this age. So this was a very qualified gentleman in the material sense, this Sanatana Goswami. And he was a prime minister in the government, and his brother was the finance minister, Rupa Goswami. They were very young. They were younger than Lord Chaitanya, which is not often known. They were 23, 20, like that. But they still had this responsible position. So they became enthralled and very inspired by Lord Chaitanya. They decided to leave that exalted mission where they had all kinds of influence and money and everything. And they decided to surrender to Lord Chaitanya, who's an incarnation of Krishna, and to become his prime associates and servants, disciples. So when Sanatana Goswami finally met Lord Chaitanya again in what is today called Benares, but I think then was called Varanasi, major city in northern India, I think, right? So he surrendered to him. He had, he'd been his prime minister, and he bowed down to him, and he said, "I'm completely surrendered to you, but I have a question to ask. Who am I? And why am I suffering in this world? If I don't know that, then what's the use of all my learning and all of my money and everything? It's useless." So that really is a question that most people don't ask, because it seems to have an obvious answer. Who am I? Hey, just look at my driver's license. There's my picture, there's my name, there's my age, there's my address, and you can expand on that, a certain family, a certain lineage and everything, all pertaining to the body, what the body looks like, the age of the body, where the body lives, relationship. But the first lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, which is in the second chapter, is that you're not the body. You're pure spirit within the body. There's a difference, a categorical difference between consciousness and the body. The body is pervaded by consciousness, but itself is just a very, very, very complicated material machine that's animated because we're inside. And so that idea that there's an Atma, a soul, a spirit soul, who is within this body at this time, but as we all know, if you think about it, the body is constantly changing. We've all grown up from little babies and children and adolescents, and now we're adults. I'm an old codger, you're getting there. And but we're the same person. I feel like I'm the same person I was when I was, 60. Boy, I wish I could be 60 again. Those were the days, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and 5. I'm still the same person. So I am the knower of all of these changes of the body. And in fact, one of the names for the soul we'll find in the 13th chapter is Kshetra Gya. The word Gya means knower, and Kshetra means the field. In this case, the field of the body, where you're conscious of things going on, the pains and the pleasures and everything. And also the subtle body. You're not even the mind. The mind is not you. The mind is a very a subtle part of your body that we know it responds to things, it's connected to the senses. And the intelligence is even finer. That's your discriminating faculty. And because in the human form, that intelligence is so much greater than in lower animals, what to speak of plants. They're also living entities with very, very rudimentary consciousness. I remember when I learned about the sunflowers, when I was a kid, how the sunflowers, they're called sunflowers because they can turn. They have some independent, they could turn, so face the sun to get a better exposure. Right? You didn't know that? Yeah, it's true. But that's how much they can move. In other words, they don't have much intelligence. They can't chant Hare Krishna. So the point is, the idea is we're changing through this body. I mean, we're remaining the same, but the body is changing. And then what's really news, and is such an important part of the knowledge, is that we don't die. The body dies, but then you get another body. This idea of the transmigration of the soul. I remember when I began working for Bhagavad Gita magazine. We have a monthly magazine, which is not so prominent these days because the books are so prominent and the internet. But the monthly magazine, Prabhupada said this is the backbone of the movement, because it was when he was in India and he started publishing that BTG, Bhagavad Gita, in 1944. And it was in English. It wasn't in Hindi, it wasn't in Bengali, it was in English, because the spiritual master wanted to preach in English. So that magazine was suspended when he came to America. He just couldn't print it for a while. But then he revived it in 1966 when he had a little center started, in New York. And it's been going steadily ever since. Actually, there was a year where it suspended publication when I first came here in 1990. But anyway, when I started working on that, then I became very aware of the history and the essence of the philosophy, because devotees are always writing these articles. And one theme that was so prominent was to understand, to try to teach people in general, because this was a mass distribution magazine. Devotees would individually go out and sell it. That you're not the body, you're pure spirit soul, and that you've had lives before and you're going to have lives in the future. And this changes everything, if you really think about it, about your consideration of what's important and what you should strive for. Because anything you strive for that's related to the body, which may be a big income or a partnership with some woman or whatever, a man on the other side, and power and position, whatever it is, that's all going to be ending. It's going to end when the body ends. But you don't end when the body ends. Then the question is, what determines what your next birth is? And that's a very important understanding. That if you're violating the laws of God, violating the laws of nature, and you leave this body with all kinds of unfulfilled material desires, then you may get another human body, you may not, you may actually get a lower body. And there's all kinds of suffering. We're reading now, we happen to be reading, there's one chapter in this book called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which deals with the hells, different kinds of hells you can suffer by performing vicious activities. I remember when I was a kid, I lived near New York City. We used to go into the city every now and then. And we never went to the fancy restaurants because we didn't have much money. But we walked by them, kind of just walking around the city. And then in the windows, they'd have a little fish tank. And in that fish tank were a couple of live lobsters. And the idea is that, this lobster is very fresh. So you come in and eat, and we'll just put them right into the pot there, alive. And we'll become very, and then you can eat. I never ate lobster in my life, But I said, gee, that's horrible. Even then, just as a normal human being, you don't have to eat lobster, but just for the sake of some taste, you're causing so much suffering for this poor animal. But isn't it also the same thing with the cows? You know, have your hamburger and everything like that. It's the same thing. So that you're partially responsible for that. And that was part of your karma, and that goes into the mix of what you're going to suffer in your next life. So this kind of broadening your vision of what it means to be alive and what it means to be a living entity is the first step. And that gives us a mission as human beings. The mission is, basically, let's stop this transmigration project. Because old age, I can attest, and you can start to attest, it's no picnic. All kinds of pains come up, things that used to work don't work anymore, you know, and you worry, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen when this happens, you know. There's all kinds of anxiety that comes. So do you really want to go through that again and again and again and again and again to perpetuity, in perpetuity? Or do you want to end it? That's the mission, to end this round of birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death, like that. And how many thousands of times have we been through that? Millions of times. We don't know. So accepting that as tentatively as a worthwhile mission, then how do we accomplish that? And Krishna is describing different kinds of yoga. The main idea is that we have to accept a source of knowledge that is able to give us reliable information of what the real laws are, of what the restrictions are, and what the opportunities are in this life. That if we act according to those rules and regulations and we formulate our lives in that way, we'll achieve this goal of what Prabhupada famously said, going back home, back to Godhead, which is a very loaded phrase, because it means that's our home. We're exiles here. We have a home. This isn't it. Because the home is a place where no one can ever make you leave. But we're going to leave these very bodies. What to speak of our apartments or our houses? This is not our home. So where is that home? That home is the place that is called Satchidananda, is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss, as the Lord is. So revival of our dormant Krishna consciousness. It's important that it's dormant. Every one of us is originally pure. And we become impure by rebelling against the Lord and coming here to try to become owners and enjoyers. And instead, we suffer like anything. So real enjoyment, and we had in the fifth chapter, we had some very nice verses in the purport. I don't know if you recall, in this verse, which is so illuminating, it's a revolutionary verse. Yehi sangs bharjaja boga, dukkha yonaya evate, ajadabantam koteya nateshu ramate buddha. It says that very happiness that you experience, and this is what it means to be materially conditioned, of the senses contacting their objects, whether it's the sight or the hearing faculty, tasting, the sex desire, all of that. There's undoubtedly some pleasure to be had in just the right configuration for each of those senses. And that's what the mind does. The mind is scanning. Oh, there's something pleasurable. You know, it's something to eat, some opposite sex, whatever it is. Now employ the intelligence department to figure out how to get it. You see? This is material life. And then, though the desire is now implanted in your heart, you see? And we're told, it explains in the 15th chapter very, very concisely about how the mind, we're filled with all these unfulfilled desires, plus the karma, you know. Yeah, you know, you want to eat that lobster again, but you got a lot to pay for that, you know, the pain you caused. That's also in your and the super soul, Krishna, I probably mentioned in the super soul is present here, that it's all understood and remembered. In other words, there's a record of what you've done, you know, all the way from childhood. So this is going to bring us to another situation, another body. All of that, compiled all together. So, the process of bhakti yoga is meant to give us a connection. The word yoga means to connect. So the different ways of connecting, and the best way we'll learn at the end of this chapter, and the next chapter, and the next 6 chapters, which are the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. The middle 6 chapters. There's 18 chapters. This is chapter 6. So 7 through 12. 12 is called Bhakti Yoga. It's just 20 verses. It's a very concise chapter. But all those chapters deal directly with this process. It's meant to link us as the soul, up with the Supreme Soul, God, through the process mostly of sound, of transcendental sound, such as this Bhagavad Gita is transcendental sound. As you've noted, we like to chant these Sanskrit verses. So this Hare Krishna mantra is a Sanskrit verse. It's a verse composed entirely of names of God and God's internal pleasure energy. All personal. Everything is personal. And so this particular mantra from the Vedas, from the Upanishads, it's not made up. It's ancient. And it's said to be the most efficacious in counteracting the ills and evils of this particular age. We're in an age called the Kali Yuga. Kali means quarrel and strife and war. Isn't that what's going on in this world? It's so prominent. And so it's not a great age for practicing this kind of yoga that's described in this chapter. This is Dhyana-yoga, it's called. It means the yoga of meditation. And why is it eightfold? I think Prabhupada mentions that in his purport. The purpose of practicing the eightfold yoga is to control the mind, make it a friend in discharging the human mission. The human mission, which is to transfer our attachment and our absorption of mind from matter to spirit. And not just spirit in general, but the Supreme Spirit, the person, Supreme Person of Krishna. And so we chant the name of Krishna, which is the main process of this age. But we also have the deities, where we can engage our sight. We have the prasadam, where we engage our taste. And we have so many things to do, engage our body in cleaning and preaching and talking, and all in relation to Krishna. And that purifies the soul of the coverings of Maya or illusion, so that the natural affinity for God comes out. We all have that. There's a wonderful verse by Lord Chaitanya as he's teaching Sanatana Goswami. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi Shavanadi Shuddha Chitte Koreye Udoi. And Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema means the eternal perfection of love for God, for Krishna. Is not something that is superficial or extraneous that needs to be imposed on the soul or that you bring into the soul. It's already there. It's intrinsic. Sadhya kamunoi. And how do we realize it? Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte. Very instructive. So this is Bengali language. It's not Sanskrit. Shravana means hearing. Adi means chanting, remembering, all of the process of devotional service. But beginning with hearing. Shuddha Chitte means purifies the consciousness. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. This is just like Lord Chaitanya says. Purifies the consciousness of everything that's extraneous and is blocking and is causing us to, the mirrors of the mind is covered with this dust of impurities. So it purifies that, so that the natural love for Krishna can be awakened. Nitya said, Sadhya Kamanoi Shavanadi Kodeye Udoi. It automatically awakens when that purification process is going on. So this is very encouraging. We already have it. We just don't know we have it. It's like a treasure you have that you didn't even know you had. There's an analogy like that Lord Chaitanya describes. So this process was brought to these shores way back in 1965, which is now over 57 years now, by Srila Prabhupada. He was assigned to do that by his spiritual master or guru, and he wasn't able to do it until senior years. He was 68, turned 69 on the boat. Boat doesn't mean the ocean liner. He was on a cargo ship, a free place on the cargo ship that was given to him by this saintly lady who owned it. And so he didn't know what he was going to eat when he came here, and he didn't have any money, and he had one contact deep in Philadelphia. That was it. It was like, materially, it's like, this is a bankrupt. She would say, Swamiji, I'm not going to give you the free ticket. You're just going to go and die there. I'm not, probably was already 69, you're going to be 69 years old, frail health. So probably he had a sit-in. I don't know if you even know what sit-ins are anymore, but back in the 60s, they were very prominent. I protest. So he sat down on her front stairway in her office, and there's a photo of him chanting Hare Krishna, waiting for her to change her mind. So she did finally, and she gave him free passage. So it was very heroic, very wonderful that Prabhupada came, and he was able to at great effort to start this movement and to give this knowledge, what we are, what the mission in life is, what we, how should we endeavor, and what the process is. And gradually he was able to print books, which Bhagavad Gita is the main, the main one that in the early days certainly. So, and it's teaching. So what is it? What is this thing? Bandharatma manastasya. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But one who has failed to do so, the mind will remain the greatest enemy. So imagine you're living with that greatest enemy. Sometimes there's so much anxiety around today. I read sometimes how the young kids, there's the depression and anxiety, unable to study, and all this stuff is going on. And it's no mystery. Why? Just look at the nature of the world around us. This pandemic was a huge thing. You couldn't go to school, and you're isolated, and you fall behind in the class, and then the geopolitical situation and all kinds of stuff. So that's the mind. The mind is your worst enemy. Anxiety, depression. What am I going to do? And so the Krishna consciousness, the cloud lifts. When you actually begin the discipline of Krishna consciousness, the mind automatically becomes disciplined just by hearing the holy name, just by the regulation. But that's why association is so important, because there's peer pressure. The ashram is good. Oh, I can't sleep in. It's crazy. I got to go to Mangalarti. But if you're living, 10 miles from the temple, or even 10 blocks from the temple, it's, hey, I'll chant later. You know what I mean? Now back to sleep. So, because the mind, the mind and the intelligence, they are conditioned, and it's very difficult to overcome them without proper discipline. So, when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart. Now, this is another point made by Lord Chaitanya in his teachings to Sanatana Goswami. And that is that the super soul, we can't hear him now, right? I mean, he's inside, he's trying to give us good advice. Sarvasya chahamriti sannivishto, who knows the next line? Mattak smitir jnanam apohanancha. So from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness also. And then he goes on in different veins. So Krishna is ready to speak to us from within the heart. And he is speaking, but we can't hear him. We don't want to hear him. So, out of his mercy, he comes outside, externally, as the Bhagavad Gita and other books. But especially Bhagavad Gita, as Krishna is directly speaking, and as the spiritual master, and as, the great sadhus. So this is the great value of real sadhu sangha, is that we can refine our consciousness by hearing from the super soul the same message, and gradually being able to hear the Lord's voice within when we get very purified. Always have that guidance. Krishna says that aham savasya pabhavo mattak sarvabhavata idmad bhavajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. The first of the 4 main verses of Bhagavad Gita. That I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. The wise who understand this perfectly worship me with all their hearts. And how do they do it? This is what they do. Matchitta madgata prana bodhayantak parasparam. Katayantastamam nityam tushyanti chadamanti cha. They place their minds on me in so many ways, chanting the holy name. And gata prana, their life energy is directed to me in service. And gata prana bodhayantak parasparam. They gather together and speak about me. Katayantastamam nityam. They're always glorifying me. And what do they experience? Tushyanti and ramanti. Tushyanti is great satisfaction. Ramanti is spiritual pleasure. So this is how they enjoy. And Krishna says in the next verse, Tesham, for them who are acting in this way, Satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam, who are always linked to me in this way and who worship me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. How does he do that? Through the heart. And by sending Srila Prabhupada, so we have the books and all this, and the Sangha, he's giving us instruction. We have to be willing to take it. And then he says something very personal. Tesham eva nakamparta mahama jnana jamtamaha nashiyam yatma bhavasto jnana dipena bhasvata. He says, out of my compassion for them, anukampa. In Sanskrit, it's such a wonderful language. You may recognize this word kampa as one of the ecstatic symptoms? Trembling. Remember, the body is trembling in ecstasy. So anukampa means trembling in sympathy with others. In other words, compassion. So Krishna, he's completely aware of what we're trying to advance in devotional service. So out of compassion for us, he destroys the ignorance in our hearts with the shining lamp of knowledge. So these are the 4 essential verses of Bhagavad Gita. We'll learn them in chapter 10. But it's very important to understand that Krishna is there. He's trying to help us. He is helping us. But he'll help us more the more that they are sincere and we try to control the mind, fix it on him, do our duties, and follow the process nicely. So that's how we can make the mind our friends. When the mind can't forget Krishna, because it's so attached to Krishna. There's a verse, the gopis, of course, are the best devotees, right? So they are constantly thinking of Krishna. But they're the taste, the flavor of the rasa of love is also enhanced by Krishna giving them trouble in the relationship. They're thinking he's left them, that he doesn't, he hasn't met us at the rendezvous, and all the different things. So the gopis are speaking amongst each other. And this is in the Krishna Karnamrita. And one gopi says to another, maybe Radharani, he says, Kimi hakunamakatsya bruma kutam kutamasheya. I don't think anyone else knows this verse in this room. Kimi hakunamakatsya bruma kutam kutamasheya katayati katamanyam damya mahodadeyesheya morada morada smerakare manonayanotsave kripana kripana krishne trishna chedam batalambate. Did you understand? Okay. So he said, Kimi hakunamakatsya. Whatever we have done in trying to beat Krishna, let it be finished now. Enough already. Kasya bruma. Speak about something, but don't speak about Krishna. Speak about something else, that's auspicious. That's one gopi saying to another. Katayakatam anyam danyam. But then he said, oh, Hridayeshiya, what's the use of all this? He's in my heart. Morada morada smerakare, his sweet, sweet smiling form, I can't forget it. Manonayanotsave, he's a festival for my eyes and mind. Manonayanotsave. Kamiya kundama kasya bhuma katam katamasya morada smerakare manotsave kripana kripana Krishna trishna chidam batalam. This wretched desire to meet Krishna increases more and more. There's a contradiction there, you see what I'm saying? But the idea is that you can't forget about Krishna. He's stuck in your mind. This is what we want, Now we're having trouble remembering Krishna. We have to, can't bring a mind back on the holy name. But in the advanced stage, he's so attractive and he's won our heart so much that you can't stop thinking. It's just like Rupa Goswami says, Yuvatinam yata yuni. I always forget this verse. But it is just as, it's a prayer, just as, and it's important to understand it's plural and the singular. Young girls are attracted to a young boy, or young boys are attracted to a young girl. Similarly, let my mind always be attracted to you in that way. That same idea. Is that just the enthrallment that, nothing else matters, and you're always thinking of Krishna. That's what then your mind is really your best friend. Now the mind, you let it go a little bit, boom, it goes off to something you did 10 years ago. So this is very good, very practical instruction. And then he'll continue in the next verse on the same vein. You have a question, comment, objection?
No objections. I'm just, I understand that before coming to any realizations, there's got to be a service with love done by somebody. And my question is, what if somebody's just simply serving and not studying the Shastra? Will he still come to the point of getting the same realizations compared to somebody?
Well, in other words, if you're studying the Shastra,
yeah,
and you're really understanding, then it has to be activated in something you do, practically. Mm-hmm. Because it's not long before you study the Shastra before there's a prescription of what to do and what not to do. That's what any discipline involves, doing something and not doing something else. So this is the problem with the other Bhagavad Gitas. They're not normative. They don't present it in a normative way. Normative means something that's meant to regulate your activity. like morals, ethics. They're normative. Don't do this, do this. If you do this, you'll be punished, you go to hell, whatever. But without Krishna as the center, people wonder what the purpose of morality is. And indeed, ultimately, there's really no absolute morality without understanding the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. So the sincere devotee is practicing the regulations of bhakti with the purpose of advancing, with the idea that, this will help me become more attracted to Krishna. I'll have more enthusiasm for my service, and I'll see where it's leading. Because we should feel that there's a progression in our devotional life, and that we're on a progressive path. Otherwise, we can stagnate, and we can Maya can play tricks with us. So that's why it's so important. I'd like to emphasize this, that Bhagavatam is filled with prayers. Prayer is such an important part of our devotional life. And in fact, the Hare Krishna mantra Prabhupada presented as a prayer. He said, what does it mean? It means, oh Radha, oh Krishna, please engage me in your service. There's a prayer there. And even if we may not feel that all the time, we should try to chant prayerfully. Otherwise, it can become very mechanical, and we could be, attracted away from it. But bring our intentionality to it. Why are we doing what we're doing? It always helps. Oh yes, I'm getting up early because I go to Mangalarti because my Guru Dev told me that I have to do this. I should do it. But at the same time, I realize the value, and that helps. It helps a lot if you understand the meaning of all the songs we sing as we sing them. I remember there was one temple, I don't think it was the first temple I joined, where they would actually read the English translation of the Gurvashtaka after Mangalarti. We do our little reading here, so that we're reminded, the spiritual master is getting from the cloud of mercy, and he's saving us. Because oftentimes it's too easy to let the Sanskrit and Bengali just go by you and not really thinking what it means. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. You think of the spiritual master, the lotus feet of my spiritual master, that is the abode of real bhakti, And Shri Guru Charana Rate Ese Uttamagati. Such an important line. And even more important, probably, the Guru Mukha Padma Bhata Chittiteka De Aika Arnaka De Manayasha. It's kind of the heart of the whole song. The words emanating from the spiritual master. These books are filled with those words from the mouth of the spiritual master. As I edited, it said, that is my only desire. No, it isn't. May my only desire be that I have the words of the spiritual master one with my heart, and let me not desire anything else. That's an important injunction. So the more you think like that, the more and you're aware of why you're doing everything and what the meaning of everything is, and the more enlivened you'll be in Krishna consciousness.
Just a quick one. Sometimes you might be feeling a sincere emotion that you would like to express, and if you could talk about like reciting the prayers from the Bhagavatam or just speaking something of your heart, what would be the difference?
Well, one of the main differences is that if it's from the Bhagavatam, or you know that it's bona fide, because your own emotion may not be. Although it's important to have a venue to do that, no question. But it's also very important to recite. I mean, it's one of the principles in the Nectar Devotion, reciting notable prayers. And Prabhupada showed us how. He encouraged us. He loved those Kunti prayers. There's a beautiful tape of him chanting those prayers. And you read the commentary, these wonderful purports. Like I remember when I was new, obviously I loved the Sanskrit, And there's one prayer I remember. It's not really a prayer. I mean, the favorite prayer I have is this simple prayer near the end of her prayers. Tvai me ananya vishaya mati madhupate sakrit ratamudva hatara dha gange bhaugamadhanvati. It's very pertinent to what we're reading because it's all about the mind. There's, oh, Madhu's Lord, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of Thee, not any other kind. As Ganges torrent flows into the sea, let all my love flow constantly to Thee. Anyone can come before Giridhari and recite that prayer, And then there's one in it says the prayers. It itself is not individually a prayer, but she's saying, some say you appeared in order to enliven the Yarus. Some say you appeared in order to protect Yudhishthira, and isn't it? And some say, Babesmin Klishyamananam Avidya Kama Karma Bi Shavanas Smaranahani Karishani Dikechana. That among those, who is everyone in this material world, Babesmin Klishyamananam, who are suffering in this world of birth and death. Klishyamananam is suffering. Avidya Kama, out of ignorance, performing all sorts of fruitive activities and entangle themselves in this world. So she paints the material world in two little lines. That you've come in order to revive the process of hearing and chanting about you to relieve the people of this misery. Shavanas and smaranahani, and remembrance. And then she has a beautiful verse describing the benefits of hearing and remembering Krishna. Shinvanti gayanti gunanti bhikshnasa smaranti nandanti tabehi tangjana taheva pashyant achidena tavakam bhavar pabaho padamam padambujam. Beautiful statement. So it's Shinvanti, hearing, gayanti, and singing. Shinvanti gunanti means accepting, listening to. Shinvanti gayanti gunanti bhikshnasa, constantly. And thus smaranti, remembering you. With great joy, nandanti. Tava ihitam, what are you remembering? Your activities, your lila. Tava ihitam jana. Those people who do this, then jana te'eva pashyant achidena tavagam. Without, in a very short time, achidena, they see your lotus feet, which that vision of your lotus feet stops the powerful flow of the river of birth and death in their lives. Very dramatic, probably a beautiful purport describing that. So this getting together with your God brothers and sitting down with a book or your little phone, whatever it is, a source of knowledge, and sharing these things and hearing and chanting about them is the best way, is the easiest process of yoga, become enlivened. That's my little experience. That's why I give these classes. All right, we have time for one more. And what happens if you conquer the mind? He says right here, very nice, text 7. Saul, you have a question? Okay, you're first after this one. Chitatmana prashantasya Paramatma samahitaha Shitoshna sukadukeshu Tatamana pamaneyo. For one who has conquered the mind, the Supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Purport: actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached this destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, or Supersoul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme. So, Prabhupada is always bringing us to the pinnacle of understanding with his purports. So, this idea that you have to accept some higher dictation. Now, that higher dictation, unfortunately, can also be one of these enemies that we have in our heart. We said the mind can be the worst enemy. But actually, you can find a lot of enemies. The lust, the anger, the greed, the illusion, the madness, There's that one of my favorite verses, I put it into a poem. Kama dinam katina katita palita durni deshas tesham jata may nakaruna natrapa no upashanti Uttrijaitan atayadupate sampratam labdha buddhis twamayatak shadanam abhayam mam nayung swatmadase. So this is a verse that may have been written by Madhavendra Puri. This is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in one of his lectures he attributes to him. So it says, in how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. So here he paints a picture of these, kama adinam. Kama is lust, and adi is etc. So what comes from lust, we learned in the second chapter, is anger, when it's frustrated. And when you can't express that anger, you get depressed. Depression, it can be a killer, right? Kama adi, and this is all, katina katita, in how many ways? So visualize, somehow when I read this verse, I always visualize this scene from a movie I saw when I was 7 years old. One of those things about the war in Egypt and everything, and you have this slave ship, and you have the slave guys with the whips, and the guys are in chains, and they're pulling those oars. Did you ever see anything like that? Yeah. So we're pulling out those oars, and we're run by the slave masters, the lust. You can't give it up. You get obsessed, and everything happens. And then if you can't have the object, they kill somebody, or self-destruction, or take the drug, whatever. In other words, it's just so destructive. So that lust, anger, greed can take heart. People be so greedy, and never have enough. Oh, I only have $10 billion. But this Bezos, he has $150 billion. I got to work much harder. You can't spend it in a lifetime, but you know what I mean? I mean, that's what goes on with these guys, But they're slaves of that. They think they're on top of the world. They have all this money, but they're really slaves of it. They had a lottery, I read. So there was a $1 billion lottery ticket. And they found a winner, but a month ago, and whoever got it will not claim it for some reason. Because they've done studies. The people who win the lottery are more miserable than the people who don't win the lottery. Imagine, suddenly, Saul, you won $20 million. Hey, Saul, can you lend me a little money? And you have like 100 people, your old friends, who you never... No, it happens like that. So in this regard, if you'll allow me, there's a prayer in the Prajavali how you can dovetail this greed. It's a prayer to become a miser. Now, we don't want to be a miser, but this is a miser. It says, Vichayani vichayani vichintani punak punaha kripanasya dhananiva tvannamani bhavantanak. Compelled to constantly collect and contemplate his hoard. Right, they have a hoard of money. Compelled to constantly collect and contemplate his hoard, the miser... No. Compelled to constantly collect and contemplate... No. Constantly collect. Yeah. Compelled to constantly collect and count his precious hoard, the miser contemplates his wealth with avaricious aims. Please bless me to become a miser who's compelled, O Lord, to constantly collect and count and contemplate your names. This idea of greed, the verse by Ramananda Roy in his quote, teachings to Lord Chaitanya, right? Lord Chaitanya took the role of the student, and he asked questions of Ramananda Roy. So he finally comes upon this verse. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate. Tatta laulyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti sukatayana labhyate. This is a verse that we should learn. So he's saying that Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati. Now Prabhupada explained that this is the origin of the phrase Krishna consciousness. It comes from this line. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati. The mind absorbed in Krishna bhakti rasa. Relishing the mellows of devotional service. That's Krishna consciousness, ultimately. You could, if you find it somewhere, you should buy it, purchase it. Are you going to find it in Vons? Are you going to find it in Ralph's? Maybe in Sprouts? No. Trader Joe's? No, not in Trader Joe's. So he says, try to buy it if you can. And then he said, but what's the price? Greed. The only price is your greed for it. You can't get either the greed or the Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavatam by any amount of pious activity. It's not something you can get like that. So that's the perfection of the mind. When the mind is trained in such a way that all you want, what you want most ardently than anything, is to serve Krishna and Radharani, somehow or other in certain specific ways. That's the mind is your friend, and you dream about that. That's why Prabhupada said 24 hours a day. I'm sorry, did you have something? Because we're running out of time.
Yeah, but I think it's how. Sure. I can be brief. Okay. Thank you. This is really nice. It's great to be back in Gita class. Yeah, it's really nice.
I thought maybe you made a mistake. You thought it was the morning class because we never had seen you here before.
Yeah, your morning class was so profound and I was talking to Dr. Bob, and we were talking about Rajananana and how powerful his classes were, and I don't want to miss the boat while I still have a chance.
Okay.
Okay, all right, well. So this is Govardhan's, text 6 is Govardhan's one of his heavy hitters on books. When he wants to show the Gita to someone and he wants to show them a shloka that they can kind of read and sort of get, he tells them about the enemy of the mind, or the mind being the best friend. People,
they relate to that.
Yeah,
they relate to that. Yeah.
So, and then I was actually thinking, because these two purports go together nicely, because the first sentence of 6 is talking about the Eightfold Yoga System, which I know ends in Samadhi.
Yeah.
And then this purport's talking directly about the effects of Samadhi and how, right, because they do all this Eightfold Yoga practice to achieve a state where they're constantly in meditation, right?
Yeah.
And they've done it through
we
rigor.
don't have to do that. Prabhu, I'm sorry, look at the clock.
Okay.
The curtains will open and it's going to break. But maybe, we can spend a little time afterwards.
Yeah, okay.
Or tomorrow.
Okay.
All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Does any